we shall begin by looking at the Blitz. The Blitz was a continual bombing of England by Nazi Germany. It began on the 7th of September 1940 and ended on the 10th of May 1941. This was 8 months of attacks on England. It all began after a retaliation by the British on Germany. From this, Hitler was said to be furious. He issued the order, and I quote, for disruptive attacks on the population and air defences of major British cities, including London, by day and night. During the first phase of attacks, there were between 100 and 200 bombers that raided London every night but one, between the middle of September to the middle of November. By the time of mid-November, more than 13,000 tons of high explosive had been dropped by Germans. The British defences were weak at the time. This gave the Germans a combat loss of a mere 1%. The bombing resulted in more than 1 million houses being destroyed and 43,000 civilian deaths, which was of course prevented by the use of tube stations as cover. Due to the threat such bombing would occur, the government had planned for a mass evacuation of major cities and urban areas. There were 2 evacuation efforts during the war. The country was split into zones for the evacuations to take place. There were 3 zones: evacuation, neutral and reception. The government had planned for around 2 million evacuees from London alone, but it seems that they had overestimated demand. The first evacuation efforts, which began on September 1st, 1939, resulted in 3.75 million people being moved to safer areas in the country. The majority moved southwards to coastal resorts, care homes and private housing in more rural counties. The more wealthy of the population made their way abroad to America or Canada, and even stayed in hotels for the duration.
Meanwhile, there's more merriment down on the farm. So, how do you like country life?
Oh, it's wonderful, sir. It's wonderful, sir.
And you, George, what have you done since you've been here?
Well, I've seen, a rabbit.
Upon the fall of France, second evacuation efforts were put into place. This was due to the recent vulnerability of seaside towns on the east coast. 200,000 people were moved or relocated. This mass evacuation caused many families and relatives to be split up during the move. Many were put onto the first available train, and on returning, it was found that 38,000 people were living without homes. Another threat to the British was the severe lack of food, materials and fuel. The government, 4 months after the start of war, issued a limit on food sold throughout the country. This was called rationing. Each person would receive a ration book containing coupons once they had registered with their local shop.
The government introduced the ration book, which controlled the amount of meat, cheese, eggs, sugar and so on that each individual could buy.
The shopkeeper was given enough food for his or her registered customers. Upon purchasing goods, the client would hand over a coupon as well as money for their items. There were, of course, exceptions to this. These were pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pregnant women were allocated more food coupons, and nursing mothers were issued more milk. The majority of foods were rationed, ranging from cheese, eggs and milk to bacon, jam and breakfast cereals. 55 million tons of foodstuff were imported yearly, and this continued for 14 years. Rationing continued long after the war. This was mainly to do with feeding the population of devastated European areas which had gone under attack during the war and were unsustainable.